What's up? Welcome back to TV Bowling Supply Channel, and today we're going to talk a little bit about 2LS. You know, we got the Fate, obviously, it kind of just makes sense, the old Belmo ball, and then we got an ASIM, my favorite ASIM, the Proton Physics. So we'll show a little bit about how I would personally lay out a ASIM ball versus a symmetric ball, and also kind of give you some, I guess, broad guidelines about how to necessarily lay yours out. So first, obviously, if you don't have a PAP, you kind of need a PAP to get this done. So go to your local pro shop, local Storm VIP pro shop, and get your PAP measured. They should be able to do that for you. Shouldn't be too big of an issue. Have to throw a couple shots and should be able to get that done. Then we'll use that information to kind of move forward here. So the first, it's kind of a 5-step process here. So the first 2 steps are the same as the normal Storm vector layout system. So I told Mikey we'll link it down below, but we'll also kind of give you a Cliff Notes version of what the vector layout system is. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to start with a pin to PAP distance, a PAP that we were just talking about. It's kind of your thumbprint of how you release the bowling ball onto the lane. So it's kind of unique to you, so if you see a video online, your PAP is probably not going to be the same. So definitely go get that and figure out it for yourself. So this pin to PAP distance, in the grand scheme of things, is kind of how strong the bowling ball can be. Obviously, these bowling balls are designed to have a certain strength, and then this layout is basically dictating how strong we can make this bowling ball in particular. Think of it as a bell curve. So start at 0, basically at the bottom. As it goes up, 3 3/8 would be the peak. So that's basically the direct distance in between the X and the Y axis. That's 3 3/8, that's the top. And then as it goes further, it kind of goes back down. You get to 6 3/4. That's basically the equivalent of a 0. I would test Mikey's editing skills and put a little bell graph on there, but we're still at the basic level here, so we'll just imagine one, right? Just imagine a little bell curve there. So for me personally, since this is such a strong bowling ball, and being a two-hander with a higher rev rate, I don't personally like to drill them too strong. They just get to a point where they're kind of not really usable. Right? If they are usable, they're not usable for very long, so it's kind of seems to be a little bit of a waste. So I'll just kind of walk you through my personal favorite layout on a Proton Physics. So I start with 5 1/4 pin to PAP. So we got a little handy little arc ruler here. Place the little pointer right there in the center of the pin. I find 5 1/4, and I draw myself a nice little arc. We're going to make the arcs big just to kind of show you. So anywhere on that arc is 5 1/4 from the pin. Simple enough, right? And following the normal vector layout system, our next number is going to be the mass bias to PAP. So it's going to create a intersecting line, and that is where our PAP is going to be. So basically another little bell curve here. Think of it kind of the same distance. It's a little bit different. Think of it as kind of the further the mass bias is away from your PAP, it does necessarily make it a little cleaner. It makes it a touch weaker, I guess you would say, but it makes it a little cleaner through the front part of the lane, and it helps it kind of continue down lane. Now obviously, this being a big, strong, solid bowling ball, it's not like you're going to get a Fate ball motion out of it, right? So it's cleaner and more down lane for this type of bowling ball. So there's still some, basically you're not turning it into a pearl bowling ball, but it should help it continue a little bit more. So that's what I like to do with these big, strong bowling balls. I don't necessarily want them to kind of stand up and puke. I like to help them get a little further down the lane to help it kind of create a little bit more motion. So I'm actually going to use the same number. I'm going to use 5 1/4 again. So handy arc tool right in the center of that mass bias. And we draw a little intersecting line. So now this is the PAP. Boom, right there. Okay? Now, that's where things get interesting. Right? So this is where the difference in the 2LS versus the normal vector layout system. So the normal vector layout system, you're basically, now you're drawing the pin buffer. And so we're changing that, right? So we're not doing the normal pin buffer. So now, for me, it makes it a little easier. I just flip the ball upside down. That's how I like to do it, right? So now we're creating a pin to the center of grip number. So we only have 2 fingers, right? We're only putting the 2 fingers in the bowling ball. So our center of grip is actually the bridge of our fingers. Now, the difference here is the pin to center of grip actually changes or can change the RG and differential of the bowling ball itself. The pin closer to the fingers that raises the RG and lowers the diff, basically making it overall a little bit weaker, and it helps it get down the lane a little bit further. That would be the equivalent of pin down, right? The further it gets away, you're basically increasing differential. At a certain point, you would start to increase differential, and you would start to lower RG. So it's basically making it a earlier rolling ball and a ball that's going to flare a little bit more, so increasing its overall strength. Now, it's still, you kind of want to use that same gap. 6 3/4 would be the furthest you want to go away. You don't really obviously want 0, because you'd just be drilling right through the pin. Typically, you want to stay in between 2 and 6. So personally, I like this one to be a little bit of a shorter pin to center of fingers, because like I said, super strong bowling ball. If you make it too strong, it kind of gets to be a little bit unusable. Now, there are instances where if you want to drill it a little further away from the fingers, really use that core strength and keep it in front of you, make the ball hook and just be ultra smooth, then you can definitely make the pin to center of grip further away. But for how I like to use this bowling ball, I like a little shorter pin to center of grip. So I'm going to use the shortest one. I'm using 2, right? I don't recommend using less than 2. I'll be 100% honest here. I use less than 2, right? My favorite one is actually 1 3/4, so it's close enough, right? It's close enough. But we'll do 2, just for the sake of the video. We'll do 2. All right. So now, if you notice, I'm drawing that towards, it would be towards where the fingers are going to be. Now, obviously, you kind of have to make an educated guess, but it's going to be on this side of the markings here. So that's where I'm drawing. So anywhere on that arc is going to be 2 inches from the pin. Now, this is where your PAP comes back into play. Knowing those numbers, now Mikey can link the storm vector, or I guess it would be the lightning arc chart, down in the description below. So that'll be down in the description below for you to use. But basically, it's a large table, and it has your horizontal PAP at the top and your vertical PAP on the side. And it's basically a table. You look over to your number, my personal number, 5 1/4 over, and 2 1/4 down. So I'm look for 5 1/4, go 2 1/4 down. I know mine is 5 1/2 inches. So basically, it's creating the hypotenuse and finding that actual third angle. I'll explain that in a little second. It'll be easier to see once I complete. So now I'm actually starting from the PAP. So we're basically reversing the PAP. So starting from the PAP, putting the pin there. Like I said, using that chart, my number is 5 1/2. So I'm going 5 1/2 back to that 2-inch center of grip number that we just drew, and creating a intersecting arc there. Okay, so this center of grip that's where our fingers are going to be. So we're drawing from the PAP back to where our fingers are going to be. Okay? Now we're using that vertical number that we have in our PAP. My number, 2 1/4. Since mine is 2 1/4 down, we would actually, since we're reversing it, we're going 2 1/4 up. So 2 1/4 up from the PAP. So this is the, I guess would be the vertical axis line for the normal VLS. So if you kind of think about a vertical axis line going up, that's kind of where I draw the number at. But 2 1/4, making another arc there, and those are my personal numbers, so your numbers could be different. Make sure you know what your PAP is. But in the grand scheme of things, this is what we have, right? These are the first two that create your PAP. This would be the center of grip. That's 2 inches from the pin, since that is my desired layout. And then these final two markings are going to be based off of your PAP. So make sure you check that chart and figure out what those numbers are going to be for you. Now, the last little bit, take a little handy dandy pro sec here. Now we're lining up, so since our fingers are going here, right, this is our center of grip. We want to get that lined up, and we want to have it intersect the top of this final line that we drew. So that's the very top of our PAP. And we're going to draw a line right through there. Okay, intersecting. Now, I was telling you that it would be a little easier to see. We were talking about that table, finding that hypotenuse. The old school way is drawing the vertical axis line, right? Right? So you see, we basically have a right triangle here. So what that chart does is it finds the distance here. So that's where that chart comes in handy. Finds that little extra number that we can create the arc with. So it's a little cheat code. It's a little cheat code. Shout out Alex Hoskins for that little cheat code. Actually, the whole stinking layout system, right? Shout out Alex. Genius. So in theory, that's where our fingers are going to go, right? So where this intersects, that is the absolute center of our bridge. So we will create our center line here, and our fingers. Remember, it is the center of our fingers. It's not the cut line, it's the center of our fingers. So if you want to be exact, you can go like, you know, well, drop the pencil. Keep that in there.
We will.
So we go like a half down and draw that line over, and that's where you can be. Boom. Fingers right there. Make sure you put your plus sign so you know which way to throw the bowling ball. But so that is very close to what my favorite layout would be for the proton physics. So obviously different ways you can use this bowling ball. Like I said, if you want to make it a little stronger, that pin's just a little further away from the center of the fingers. Yeah, that's my ASIM, right? So now, what everyone wants to see, the two-handle layout on the Belmo ball, okay? First order of business, since it's symmetric, we're going to draw the little mass bias, right? So 6 3/4 from the pin through the CG, making a little mark here, and now we have our mass bias. Okay, so now we got 3 markings, same as the asymmetric ball. Now, personally, I'm just giving you some personal information from using this type of bowling ball. Actually, really, Belmo balls in general, I've found some success with a little further pin to PAP distances, but also a little further pin to center of grip distances. So, I'm going to give you my fate layout. 5 3/4 pin to PAP here. Right there, 5 3/4 pin, and this number Personally, I like 4.5. That's kind of that mid-range. Not going to be too too weak or too far down the lane, and it's not going to want to stand up too early either. It's kind of that happy medium. So 4.5. Making that intersecting line, right? So like we said before, it's PAP right there. Now, like I said, turn it upside down. Now this one is the one on this type of bowling ball. I like it to be a little further away. So since we have a weaker pin to PAP, we don't want it to be too weak and not really hook at all. So we want to make it a little stronger. I like 4.5 for this number here. 4.5. So now I have 4.5 pin to center of grip line. And the final two measurements based off your PAP. Like I said, my lightning arc number is 5.5. Right there. And then the PAP, since it's 2.25 down, drawing 2.25 up. Whoa. Okay. Boom. Just like over here. Center of grip is right here. Lining it up with that final 2.5, or 2.25, I'm sorry, number right here. Drawing a line, intersecting. Now we have our center of grip. I'm going to get technical, we'll draw a 1/2 inch down. And boom. Something like that. So you can see between these two, you see the pin, how much further it is away from the fingers on this one. That's that 4.5 versus something like this that would be a 2. Now, you don't necessarily always want to drill weaker bowling balls with further pin to center grip. You don't necessarily always want to drill stronger balls with shorter pin to center grip. That kind of gets everything into that middle zone, and too many bowling balls become alike. So kind of got to have some variety. Talk with your pro shop operator and see what they would recommend for you. But these are two layouts that I personally use on some of my stuff and that I've had success with. So hopefully this can help you out, whether it be laying out your own bowling balls or just figuring out some layouts. Maybe you can take a look at some of the bowling balls you like and some of the bowling balls that you dislike. See where that pin is, see how far it is from your fingers, and maybe you might be able to figure out some trends that you like or don't like. So hopefully this helps. Make sure to press that like button, hit that subscribe button. We're going to try to bring some more content to you guys, and hopefully we'll be able to spread some knowledge that we're lucky enough to know. So thanks again, guys, and we'll see you in the next one.